I don't want to keep anybody waiting. So, how Aussies are winning with the responsibility process. Um, I'm told that it's silly season there, so I hope you're enjoying a silly season. We had a Thanksgiving holiday here in the US last week, and I certainly enjoyed that. I'm Christopher Avery, and I'll certainly tell you more about myself in a little bit. Well, let's see if we can advance this slide. So, why this webinar? I recently was in Sydney and Melbourne for a couple of weeks in September, doing about 8 appearances where I was giving keynotes for Scrum Australia on the responsibility process and doing workshops and doing some meetups. And I found a real thirst for my work there. My work has not been as widely introduced in Australia as it has been in other parts of the world. And so there was a lot of people interested in one particular thing that I do, which is a program called the Leadership Gift Program, which I'll tell you more about later, which any individual in the world can participate in. But the challenge is that it's time optimized in terms of our live web meetings for the Americas and Europe. And it would be 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning for you from Australia to participate. And so there was a groundswell of let's do something about it from interested people in Australia. And I made the offer that when 25 people joined that program, I would schedule a monthly call at a time convenient for you. And I would host that call personally. So this is what we're doing about it. And that was, we decided to advertise this webinar. It's an informational webinar on the responsibility process. And you can make some informed decision as to whether it's something that you might want to get involved in or not. So I'm pleased that you're here. Who is here? Mostly people from all around Australia, but there's no reason that people from the rest of the world couldn't join. So there are people also on the call from, so far I've noticed, Montana and from other places in the United States. I don't know if anybody from Europe would be on the call. It's a little middle of the night for them. Myself, it's a little after 7 p.m. Central Time. I live in Austin, Texas, on the 28th, where it's noon for you. I hope we made this convenient for you at your noon hour on the 29th. What are we going to do today? As promised, I'm going to fill most of the hour with content about the responsibility process and about how to get started using it. And I'm going to include success stories from some of the Aussies, who have already been practicing for a little while. We have some folks who are new members of the Leadership Gift Program and some who are certified trainers, and they're going to share their stories with you. I invite you to participate in a limited way. You have a couple of choices. You have a little hand icon that you can raise. If you do that, I'm probably not going to call on you during the main part of the presentation, but you can go ahead and play with that now if you'd like, and you can raise it and lower it. But later, I will open it up to Q&A, and you can use your hand to queue up for you and I to talk, and then I'll unmute you, and we can have a conversation. And the other feature that you can use is the little question mark in a circle icon, where you can actually send anything to me that you want: comments, questions, insights, ahas, thanks, feedback, disappointments, encouragement, whatever you like. I also will probably only be checking that rarely. So that's how you can participate, and we'll end in the last 5 or so minutes before Q&A with how you can get involved if you're interested. So let's move along. So briefly, who am I? If you're not aware of me, I'm known as the responsibility process guy. I became very interested in how teams step up to personal and shared responsibility, when teams come together and gel? And where does this responsibility come from? And is it really a character trait like I was raised to believe it is, that some people have and some people don't? Or is it something that can be generated and tapped into, even by a software project leader or an engineering team leader? And I ran into this little research program that started decades ago. And I was fascinated with this model, which today we call the responsibility process, and with all the psychology behind it. And so I joined the research team. And I've been, I would say, an applied organizational and leadership scientist working in the front lines of leadership in corporations around the world with this material for many years, trying to figure out how to best help people understand how to take responsibility for anything in the world and overcome any challenge, and how to teach it, and how to work towards mastery, and how to build it into teams and cultures. So you'll learn more about me as we go forward. That's basically who I am. So let's get into my promise, which is to give you content on the responsibility process. So the responsibility process is a model of a pattern in our minds that show how we process our thoughts, usually unconsciously, about taking and avoiding responsibility. And the pattern starts at the bottom of this chart that you're looking at with lay blame. We move into the pattern there. And and we move, if we get stuck in blame with whatever answer our mind hands us, we stay there. And we define our world and why we are having the effect or the problem we're having based on that. And if we don't accept it, we graduate up to the next mental state, justify, and so on. I'll walk you through these mental states. But essentially, for me, what this pattern does is it leads us to the first how-to approach for understanding, teaching, and taking personal responsibility. For eons, since recorded history, since Homer's Iliad, and since Socrates, we've been told we should take 100% responsibility, which indicates that we don't always. But all of those experts and gurus who tell us that we should, they don't tell us how. Just that you should, that it's a moral imperative. And what this pattern shows is, now that we understand how our mind processes thoughts about taking and avoiding responsibility, now we have a pathway to responsibility. And all we have to do is understand more about this pattern and then how to work with this pattern. So it's about perceptions of cause and effect. For instance, in the position of lay blame, which is a mental state, I'm sure that I'm in the position of effect and that someone else is the cause of my problem. In justify, same thing, right? In shame, I see myself as both cause and effect, but I'm laying blame on self, and so on. And all these mental states below the line, below responsibility, they're not wrong, right? So one of the things this research teaches us is that blaming and justifying and beating oneself up for having a problem or a mistake doesn't make you wrong. It simply makes you human, because we all do this. And so this work brings great humanity and great compassion and great empathy towards working with each other, because our society teaches us that we're ignorant, arrogant, wrong, stupid if we do these things. And the truth is, we all do these things, and we're not all arrogant and ignorant and stupid because of it. This model also teaches me that we are far more powerful and able than we usually give ourselves credit for. And the reason is that all of these positions below the line, these mental positions, are positions of no power, no choice. Right? They're positions of being trapped or being stuck. And so we define our world as victims of our environment. And therefore, we're at the whim of our environment, and we're hoping that our environment changes, or the people we're around changes, or something changes, or that we stop making mistakes so that we can feel better. And the truth is that responsibility is also a mental state that's available to us all the time, which seems to have much more powerful logic available to us. And we're very generative and very creative in this mind. There's a lot of research that says that we have lower defensive and resistant mind, and we have an upper generative or creative mind. And I think that this model gives us access very much to that research and how it works. So the reason we're more powerful than we usually give ourselves credit for is because when we're in the mental states of blame, justify, shame, obligation, we are recreating our world there all the time. So our assumption that somebody else has to change, something else has to change for our world to get better is reinforced. And that means that we are actually creating that life for ourselves. So what we say is that if we actually start taking credit for the crummy stuff, then we can start actually seeing how we're keeping ourselves stuck and how to get off of it and move ourselves towards a much more resourceful mental state. This leads to the conclusion that leadership is innate. Innate means it's natural. It's in each one of us. And I believe that this model is the basic model of self-leadership. That leadership for me is 95% self-leadership. That if you get self-leadership correct, then you shouldn't be surprised to see people wanting to follow with you and collaborate with you and pair and partner with you and be part of your vision, part of your project, and part of your initiative. Also, all of these positions below the line show a complete lack of leadership, because what we're saying is that we can't lead ourselves anywhere because of somebody else, something else, because we're broken, something's wrong with us, or because we're stuck, we're trapped in obligation that we can't do anything about. So this has held my interest for a long time as the most powerful information I know and have to share. So at this point, I want to ask you to jot down or think about something that you want to change. Let's make this call real. Let's make it effective by having you apply it right now within this hour. Right? Everybody wants to change something. So what do you want to change? So let me tell you about a few of my heroes. I'm just going to name a few of these people. Let me tell you about the first guy, Christoph. Christoph is the founder and CEO of Catalysts, a software company in Linz, Austria. It started in 2009, I think. We met in 2000, soon after that. And he adopted the responsibility process as a core organizing principle for his company and built his culture and his leadership on it. Today, they're a very powerful software firm working on some of the coolest projects in the world, space projects and the Hyperloop and advanced automotive stuff. And they are, more than that, they are recognized as Austria's best employer to work for I think 4 out of the last 5 years, and maybe 5 out of the last 6 years. And so you can learn more at his website, and he writes about working with the responsibility process. Let me go to Tom Howdeshell, top right. Tom ran a little manufacturing company not far from here in Kerrville, Texas. And he adopted the responsibility process as a personal tool, which is something for each of these people. Christoph also adopted it for himself, not just for his organization. And in a period of about 7 years, Tom Howdeshell turned this little manufacturing plant around from being the worst employer in town to the best employer in town, from losing money on sales to having a margin of around 25%, which is crazy in his industry, and ended up becoming the employer that everybody in town wanted to work for, paid higher wages than others, and ended up selling the company for 15 times earnings, which is a huge multiple if you know about deal making and buying and selling businesses. That's 15 is really, really a big number. Now, the people who bought it immediately started running it into the ground. Tom bought into another company in Dallas, Texas called allplastics.com, took the responsibility process with him, started changing the culture there, even changing the culture of their suppliers and their customers. What's interesting is that he now has come back and bought that manufacturing plant in Kerrville after it again was not doing very well. So an amazing success story for him. Mary Leah McAnally is the dean of the MBA program at the university, or excuse me, at Texas A&M University, who has brought the responsibility process into their university, into their business school, to teach MBAs about leadership and ethics. And she has a great purpose in bringing respectability and ethics back to capitalism. And Jessica Soroki, bless her heart, started studying with me at 19 years old. Today she's 24, I believe. And she's the director of software for a sizable software company at 24 years old. And has written hundreds of blogs about the responsibility process and about her practice, which I absolutely recommend to you. So I mentioned that this is a pattern in our minds. So the pattern kicks in when something goes wrong. And by that, I mean a whoops, a uh-oh, an oh, shoot. You know those things, right? And we know that hundreds of things go wrong every day, and we know that we have emergency meetings at work about things going wrong. So it turns out that every time something goes wrong, you have a little angst because you have a conflict in your mind between what you want. So you're in motion, inspired or motivated towards a goal, and you get stopped, and there's some conflict. And that conflict has both stasis, so it's stuck, and we even say, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do. And it throws off heat or energy. And that heat or energy is what we experience as angst, frustration, upset. And it turns out that there's an automatic response in our mind that when that happens, our mind hands us an automatic answer. And it starts at the bottom of that chart called blame. So I reach for that place. I always keep my keys. They're not there. And my first thought is, after 20 some years of practicing this, my first thought is, who took my keys? And I might even look up and say, honey, have you seen my keys? With a little accusatory kind of a tone, right? So this is just a mental state. And it seems to be, if people ask why is our pattern designed this way, it seems to be a buffer system that helps us cope with problems that we don't know how to do something about immediately. And it seems like the least computational effort is at the bottom, and there's a little more computational effort in the mind as you go up. If you realize that you're blaming and decide you don't want to do it, and that's probably the biggest thing that I have to say here today, is that if we can make this pattern in our minds conscious from unconscious, then we can apply the keys to responsibility to remind ourselves that there's no resourcefulness in blaming. And that as long as we blame, we get to keep the problem. And so the interesting thing about the way our psyche works is if we stop blaming, our next thought is a justify. And a justify is making excuses based on circumstances or the way things are, right? So it's the weather, it's the economy, it's the traffic, it's the political environment, it's the silly season. That justify is very, very powerful. You and I are really, really good at this. We've been reinforced our whole life to do it. The number one justify that I work with in organizations is that's just the way it is around here. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always going to be. There's nothing you can do about it. So However, if we decide to stop justifying, so if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to go to lunch with that group of people and complain about management. I can do that for the rest of my life, and all it does is keep us feeling miserable and powerless. So if you decide to stop justifying, then you graduate up to the next mental state, which we call shame. And shame is just lay blame on self, right? Instead of saying somebody else has to change for my problem to go away, what we say is something's wrong with me, right? I have to change in some way I don't understand in order to be better. I deserve this problem, right? Why am I so stupid? Gosh, will I never learn? Right? So in shame, we're just laying blame on self, and it's in a different color here because this is where you start to realize that you and I have been reinforced all our lives for doing this, for beating ourselves up when we have a problem. And that's why it's in green, is our societies tend to reinforce this, right? So when you say, I'm the dummy, I did that, it's my fault, I'll take the hit, people say, oh, good girl, you're taking responsibility. So our society calls shame responsibility. And what they really mean is you're taking cause, right? You're putting yourself at, you're saying that it was your cause. And thank you. But you're so focused on what's wrong with you that you can't be resourceful in solving the problem. It also creates more anxiety. So you start with some, and then you start beating yourself up, and it becomes greater. If you decide to stop beating yourself up because you're human and humans beat themselves up when things go wrong and they stop blaming it on other people or the environment, then the next mental state is we call obligation. And in obligation, this is the mental state of feeling trapped, of feeling burdened, of having no choice. It's the mental state of have to, don't want to. And this is the mental state of most workers in the world. Especially if we're working in places that are not wonderful, positive, humanizing cultures. And if we feel trapped in the job. So if you're wondering if you have some of this obligation, you know, I would ask you if you have some stupid meetings you have to go to. I would ask if time slows down when you're at work instead of speeds up. I would ask if you have some stupid paperwork you have to do, if you have to go to your in-laws for holiday, if you say to your friends, I'd love to go get a cold frosty beverage after work, but I have this kid thing I have to do. So listen to our language of have to, have to, have to, have to. We say we're no longer in charge of our life, that we made a bunch of decisions that we thought were good decisions, but they come along with all these side consequences that we don't like, that we just have to put up with. So I no longer do what I want, I just do what I have to do. And it turns out that obligation is also called responsibility by our society. And you've been trained your whole life from the time you started nursery school or kindergarten. You've been trained to do what you're supposed to do. Even if you despise it, even if you don't like it, you've been trained to be good, do as you're told, stick it out. And that's the life of feeling trapped and burdened. And people ask me, what's wrong with obligation? And I say, well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with any of these. They're all human coping responses when we have problems we don't know how to overcome. But what's not resourceful about obligation is that your motivation is very low. It's barely adequate to get a pass when you're in obligation because your motivation is to survive the trap, right? It's to survive the boring meeting, not to be authentic and present and in the now at the meeting, because you might say something that has consequences that you don't want. And the other issue with obligation is you build up resentment towards whatever it is that you think has you trapped, whether it's the mortgage, the bank, the boss, the company, the spouse, the elderly parents that need your care, the children, whatever, the in-laws. And so it turns out that it's not until we refuse to be in obligation that we can actually experience the mental state of responsibility, which is a mental state of complete freedom, choice, and power. It's a place where we realize that we have the power to create our own reality, and that actually choosing blame, justify, shame, and obligation is choosing a reality, and that we have the cognitive ability to overcome any challenge, to change any part of our life that's not for us. So it's literally the ability to respond. And to put this in some context, Viktor Frankl, the great concentration camp survivor who was a neurologist and psychiatrist, and wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. In that book, he says, in between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is choice. And I think he goes on to say, and in that choice is freedom. I may have that last part of the quote not completely accurate, but it's paraphrased closely. In between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is choice. And in that choice is freedom. And that's what there is to learn about this responsibility process, and choosing to stay in these mental states below the line or getting ourselves to above the line. So there's a couple of more states that I just am not going to take the time to go into here, but there's plenty out there that you can research about this. So here's the thing for you, for your team, for your organization, is that when we're in blame and justify, we get no results. Think about this. Think about when you've participated in an ongoing conflict in your organization that's had meeting after meeting after meeting of 4, 6, 8, 10, 15 people over months or weeks, and the conversation never got out of blame and justify, right? And the question is, what was your return on investment for those meetings? What kind of results did you get for the millions of dollars that you spent in that conflict? In shame and obligation, we get unsatisfying results. We get into action and we do things, but we're not very brilliant, right? And only in the mental state of responsibility, which I call being brilliant on cue. So I could have asked you at the beginning if you'd like to be more brilliant on cue, on demand, when you demand yourself to be more brilliant, right? In the mental state of responsibility, we produce results that matter for ourselves, for our teams, and for the product or project or initiative or service that we're providing. It's truly amazing. So at this moment, I want to stop and invite one of our interviewees to join me. How about, let me see, how about Philip?
Yes, Christopher.
Hi. So Philip Gadzinski, is that correct?
That's pretty correct. Thank you.
Pretty correct. So introduce yourself just briefly. You know, what are you up to in life? And then I want to ask you a little bit about your work with the responsibility process.
Okay, so Philip Gadzinski, I work in now strategic agility consulting. So working with businesses on rethinking how they function, how they operate, and how they perform better. Essentially, organizational design. At NBN at the moment, which a few people on the call would know about, it's going reasonably well.
Great, cool. And so, tell me how you have benefited from applying the responsibility process or learning about it, why it's important to you.
So I actually heard Christopher's talk at Scrum Australia this year, but it actually, when he was speaking through the model and the steps, it just jumped out straight away. That's exactly me. So I resonated straight away, and I think we had a conversation afterwards about that. And I found it something that I thought.
So you recognized yourself in those coping states.
Yeah, all the way up to obligation. So every scenario is a different one. I end up at one of those 4 points somewhere. They're always different, but never seem to sort of transcend or be able to force myself to get to the next one. So I thought, I'll buy the book, I'll read the book. So I did that. I read the book and I thought it was okay, but it wasn't really, I didn't get as much use out of it as I thought I would. And then I understood that the course was starting, so the Leadership Gift course. And I thought, is this something that I would want to do to actually be able to get the most out of what I saw in the talk? So I signed up to the course, and I didn't think I could commit to 4 a.m. starts. And for the first few weeks, I didn't, but now I am. So I'm committing to 4 a.m. starts, and I've actually started to apply a couple of the key tools that are in there to great effect.
And so tell me about that effect. How has it changed elements of your life?
So one in particular, and I think we did this in module 4, was around intent, around intention and being clear that if there's something that you want to achieve, you specifically set that and work towards that. And the one that I set was working on a piece indirectly for the CIO at the company I'm working at. And I set the intent that we would work through this, we'd present to him and get his endorsement and support to continue on and actually reshape the company on how it's designed at the strategic level. So we actually had the presentation this Monday, and the feedback from the CIO that it was word for word bloody impressive. And what do we do now, and how do I see this land? So we set the intent a few weeks ago, started to focus on it, sort of using the tools here, took responsibility to lead it, and we've had the endorsement from the CIO to actually implement now. So for a case study for me, that's fantastic.
Wow, congratulations. So you said that you recognized yourself in those mental states below the line. Do you catch yourself now more often?
I do, but even with the negative ones, I missed one this week, which is some of those impulsive behaviors.
Oh, but you caught it later.
I caught it later. I recognized it later. I went, I just did that. Yep.
Right. Yeah, and the benefit of being able to do that is knowing the value of if you can spend more of your mental energy in the mental state of responsibility and less of your mental energy in those coping states, you can accomplish far more with whatever it is you want to accomplish, and you can be much more joyful doing it.
That's what I'm looking forward to, but it's going well so far. It's going well.
That's great. Well, thanks, Philip. I appreciate it. Anything else that you wanted to say while I've got you on here?
I think the important part is, like I said, I went to the course and I went to your session at Scrum Australia, and I read the book. But I think actually participating in the Leadership Gift course is what's really brought it to life. I think without that, I wouldn't have probably got the value out of the book. And I know you're not selling the book, but I'm just saying that the course itself, I think, has been just that engagement and taking tools away and practicing them has been probably, the most benefit.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the plug, and I'll translate that. I'll translate that to the value in this is actually practicing, and it's easiest to practice with a group, with a group of peers. And so I'm gonna move into talking about practicing here. Thanks, and we might get a chance to talk a little bit later about the course.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Philip. All right. So, so the responsibility process is gee whiz, it's inspiring, it's really cool. It's the lead piece that I put out there and do a tremendous amount of writing and blogging and articles about, and it's the piece we give away free as a poster download from my website with translation into 27 languages. The important thing to realize about it is that you want to simply know this exists and that you're not going to change it, right? So even though I've been practicing responsibility for more than 2 decades, still this pattern remains in my mind. And every time I have an upset, big or small, my mind goes to the bottom of this chart. And what my practice has enabled me to do is to climb to the top rapidly, right? And so I want you to know about the responsibility process, but knowing about it doesn't do any change for you. What makes change for you is to develop a responsibility practice. Now, what do I mean by practice? Well, let me put it very simply. How many times a day do things go wrong? Right? Dozens. For me, every time something goes wrong is an opportunity for me to practice responsibility, an opportunity for me to, instead of blaming my life on others, justifying it based on my environment or situation or circumstances, beating myself up for being a mistake-ridden, perfect human being, right? Or feeling trapped in some pattern or relationship I don't want, I can move myself to a creative mental state, the generative mental state of responsibility, and ask myself, look at this little mess. What do I want about this right now that I can do something about and move forward? And so I no longer see myself as a responsible character, right? And I believe everybody on this call is someone of responsible character. You are a responsible person according to society, which means that you got a good education and got a good job and you contribute to society. You're probably part of a family unit, etc. Right? That's being a responsible person. So I no longer see myself as just a responsible person. I believe I checked that box a long time ago. Today, I see responsibility as something that I practice, and I get to practice all day long because things go wrong all day long. And the more I practice, the more I spend time in that generative mental state instead of these coping buffer states of just trying to survive in an environment where we feel like we're a victim. So let's look at a little bit about responsibility practices. So here's the first thing. If I know you the way I've known my other audiences, right? Your mind has gone towards all those people out there that you know that really ought to learn about this. And what I have to say to you is that the responsibility process only works when self-applied. It's a self-leadership tool. So if you just picked up your phone and you messaged that person you dearly love and said, honey, I now know what's wrong with you. You're stuck in justify, right? They now have two problems. The first problem that you have diagnosed, and the second problem, which is you being in their face about it. So if you care about other people and want to spread and promote this tool, I want you to learn to do it with the same level of humanity, the same level of compassion and empathy, the same level of bringing it as a gift that I attempt to do and that I teach people to do. But my first recommendation is to lead yourself first. Develop your own practice first. Don't use this as a weapon or a labeling device for others. It's not a management tool. It's a self-leadership tool. And Jody, I'm going to ask you to come in here in just a minute right after I talk to this slide. So let me tell you about why to practice responsibility. There are so many potential reasons. Here are just a very few. Right? Do you want to be a better leader? Do you want to take charge of your life? Do you want to make better decisions? Do you want to face taller, greater challenges? Do you want to overcome any problem? Do you want to have a larger purpose in life that's pulling you forward? Do you want to generate, do you want to generate more impact, be more fulfilled, be more authentic? Do you want to enjoy better relationships? Do you want to build a culture, right? The ultimate benefits of practicing responsibility we simply call freedom, choice, and power. So you may hear sometime when people say, hello, how are you? And my response is, I'm free, powerful, and at choice. Thank you. How are you? And I don't say that to brag or boast. I don't even say it because I'm feeling it at the moment. I say it to remind myself. I remind myself that in between stimulus and response is a space, right? And therefore, my mental state at any moment in time, I am free to stay there or to change it. So I am free, powerful, and at choice at all times, even if I don't believe it. And that's a pretty generative place to be. So Jody, you going to join us?
Hi, Christopher.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm great.
Where are you today? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm in the office, so I work in the agile space, new ways of working, so helping leaders be agile leaders and teams um, operate in an agile way and deliver value. And yeah, that's me.
Cool. And you jumped right on the responsibility process when I met you at the executive meetup in Sydney. In fact, you helped to organize it. You were very jazzed about it. Tell me what, yeah, tell me what inspires you about the responsibility process and how you're working with it.
Sure. So what inspired me was it was very simple, a very simple tool, but I saw pretty immediately after I'd just seen, I think, a video or maybe read a few of your blogs, how powerful it would be. And I'm always looking to improve personally. And I also saw how it could help in an agile coaching environment potentially. And so, taking your advice, I wanted to apply it to myself first, and I read the Responsibility Process book, and I liked the book a lot, and I definitely got benefit out of reading the book, and I did start to practice more based on what I'd learned through the book. But well, I've done things in my life where I had to practice, like with meditation and yoga and agility, because I always say that the only way to learn agility is to practice. And so then when I learned about the Leadership Gift Program, and I thought that would be a good way to build support around a practice for myself, and that's why I joined.
Okay, well, we can talk about that later. Thanks for the plug again. What about how has it changed you? Why is it important to you? What do you have a success story or some subtle changes you've made? Are you happier, more fulfilled? Are you more effective?
Yeah, okay. That's a lot of questions.
Well, you choose.
um, okay. So I feel like I'm definitely on the journey, and I don't feel like I'm, ready to claim full success, but I can already see it's changing my awareness. So it's making me more aware when I'm justifying or I'm in shame or obligation. And then I definitely personally, I like to manage my energy and use my energy effectively. So knowing that I'm in a space that's not going to be productive for me is very motivating to get out of it. So it's helped me the model has helped me a lot in how I perceive things and then how I react to those things. But I feel like in my practice, I'm still learning how to identify the state I'm in and recognize it so that I can move up the ladder, as you say, quickly.
Right. But you're just 2 months in.
That's right.
Yeah. So in 2 months, would you say that the effectiveness of this model in your life, is living up to its promise?
Definitely. So I already see times when I use the responsibility process and I get a better outcome because I realize, I wasn't justified and I need to get out of there. And it's also made me feel.
And you're like instantly smarter when you realize that and make that shift, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I operate. I think it's made me operate differently than I would have in the past before I understood the material and started practicing it. And it makes me feel more in control, more powerful. And I am happier and calmer. Like I feel like I don't know. Yeah, I'm just enjoying life more than, and I already was pretty happy. So let's just put that down on the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a happy person. But that being calmer, I hear that so much from people who are in the first month or two of their practice. They just say, I'm much more at peace. I'm much more calm. Um, and I think it's because, well, I guess I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I guess it's just the belief in self goes up, the clarity about what's going on in this strange thing in our head, uh, is more powerful in terms of understanding our own psychology.
Hmm.
Yeah. Jody, thank you. hang on, we might
Thanks.
come back and say and do some Q&A or something more. So thank you so much for being
Okay.
here today.
Pleasure.
Yeah. All right, so let's do a little more of this content. So let's move into how do you build your practice? Well, you know, I'd say one of the most important things is to start, right? Start before you're ready. And what it means is to start realizing that things go wrong, big and small, all day long. And I would say start small, right? Start realizing how many conversations you participate in that's perpetuating blame and justify and even shame. And make some decisions about how you want to or whether you want to participate in those. So it helps to study and apply the core material. So the core material includes the responsibility process, the 3 keys to responsibility, which is our abilities of intention, which you heard Philip mention, awareness, which you heard Jody mention, and confront, which is really the courage to face ourselves and face our anxieties. And those are the keys to interacting with and accessing the responsibility process. Understanding what it means to commit to mastery and the path towards mastery, and the difference between 99% commitment and 100% commitment. And then understanding this idea of a problem, the anatomy of a problem, a tremendous understanding there of what causes anxiety and stress in our lives and how to constantly shed it by blasting through these problems instead of coping with them. We have another very powerful model called the power of control process. If you've ever heard that you have to actually give up control to have real power, this will help you understand that pattern in our minds. The idea of counterintentions, that we have so many intentions, call them motivations, expectations, assumptions, that we don't even know and understand. And the counterintentions is about helping to uncover those unconscious and often erroneous or limiting beliefs. And then the 4 quadrants of lifetime mastery, all part of the core material that there is to learn. But even while you're just learning that, allow yourself to be mentored by masters, by people who are ahead of you, which is one of the things that I've been doing for years in my work, is trying to create a cadre of practitioners and coaches and mentors and masters of this material all over the world, because everyone moves faster if they have someone to study with who's from either behind them or equal to them in a peer or ahead of them. And same is true for me. I have a teacher here in Austin, Texas, that was working on this material when I ran into it, so I'm not the founder of this material. And I still study with him quite often, and especially when I have big, sticky problems that I don't know how to break through myself, and he helps me. And we believe that most powerful is to surround yourself with others who are changing the same habits of mind. So the number one tool for behavior change in the world is a support group. So if you think of the way that addiction groups work, Alcoholics Anonymous, weight loss groups, others, is the behavior change happens when you surround yourself with a group of like-minded people trying to learn the same new habits that you're trying to learn and supporting one another. And so those are my thoughts about how to get started. And let me see. Oh yeah, Mark, before time runs out on us, right? Are you there to say hello?
So, hello.
Hello.
Hi. How are you, Christopher?
All right. So Mark Henry was recently in a Train the Trainer certification program that I did while I was there, and immediately saw application in your work. You're also an Agile coach and trainer. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a Scaled Agile coach, and I'm working with a couple of larger corporates at the moment. I've worked with projects and teams and people for probably easily over 20 years.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So tell me about what the project. So what is the responsibility process? What has it done in your life?
Well, I guess I read one of your articles on LinkedIn. It was about in July or August, I think it was, and it was about the responsibility process and agile leaders, and it really hit a tune within me in a similar way that when I learned about agile about 11 years ago, I had the same sort of epiphany then as I did 11 years ago after doing lots of waterfall software development. And it felt like it was very much a kind of a missing piece of the puzzle for agile and agile transformations, because most of the time as an agile coach, I'm having conversations with people that are laying blame and justifying it's how it works here and we're trying to make a big change. And when I read that article and read the book, I noticed exactly the same thing within myself. So it's quite easy to point the finger, as you said before, that you can see these patterns in other people, but I can certainly easily identify the patterns in myself, which was quite the revelation. I jumped onto this because I thought I'm going to be able to solve everybody's problems. I guess the big thing with me that I realized was that, I had to take personal responsibility for myself. I guess since I did that for over the last 4 months, I felt very much at peace. It's a lot more chilled out, and certainly made my job a hell of a lot easier.
Cool. Thank you. Well, hang on tight here. I'm concerned that people are going to want to sign off at the top of the hour, and I want to get to the 5 minutes of selling, and then we're going to take Q&A, and we'll come back and talk some more. Okay, Mark?
No worries at all.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, if you're intrigued so far, here's how I help individuals develop a solid practice. And that is, I'd like you to consider being part of a unique, proven, powerful e-learning community for practicing and mastering responsibility. Wouldn't that be cool? So this e-learning community is called the Leadership Gift Program. And it was designed to take the very powerful services that I was offering to corporate leadership development programs, very expensive, and figure out how to port those services through technology to individuals wherever they are in the world. It's self-paced. It's not a race. It gives you access to advanced coaches and mentors and masters like me. I personally host 4 web meetings every month, and I will host 5 when we have 25 Aussies who are members. We have very active member forums, extremely supportive. People really get the heart, sort of like Mark said about realizing, it's one thing to see all this pattern in others, but all of a sudden to see it in myself and realize I get to apply it to myself before I can be powerful for others. And we have frequent live Q&A and what we call application mastery group mentoring sessions. Application mastery is where we actually help people make breakthroughs to brand new freedom, choice, and power. So it's not a training per se, although there are training modules, but it's a habit change community that happens to have some core material that is really helpful if you will study it and get to know it. And it's membership based, which means that you join for either a monthly or an annual membership subscription, and you stay only as long as you're receiving value. And when you're no longer receiving value, you move on. So the challenge for Australians, as I said earlier, is our web meetings are optimized for the Americas and Europe. And as you heard Philip say, it's 4 a.m. for you when I'm hosting a web meeting. So I made a promise when I was there that when 25 Aussies join the Leadership Gift Program, I will schedule and host one monthly web call at a time convenient for you, and you will help to set what that time is every month. And so far we have 13 pioneers in a couple of months, and we're looking for 12 more. And if this is for you, here's a limited offer for you. And by the way, if you're unaware of it, this PDF is in the handouts section of your control panel. So you can download this PDF and you'll have this information. So the next 15 people who use the promo code FREEDOM, FREEDOM, will save USD 50 off the first month or USD 100 off the first year membership. And you can learn more at the info page, which is at www.the.leadershipgift.com. Right? So remember, it's the subdomain THE, www.the.leadershipgift.com. And at this point, I think I've done real close to what I said I was going to do in terms of 55 minutes of content and 5 minutes of sales pitch. So I'm now open to Q&A. And my recommendation is that you raise your hand if you want to ask me a question. I first need to get out of this presentation mode, and I will put that up on the screen so that you can see that. And so, yeah, questions, comments. So I see people have written some questions. So Neil, I'm unmuting you, Neil. So go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Christopher.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Neil Isaac from Sydney.
Hi, Neil.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for this presentation, and just have a question. If you can give us an office setting example of the behavior before and after applying the responsibility process.
Oh, sure. So this is pretty common. I worked with, so when you say office, I'm assuming we're introducing the responsibility process to a group of people and inviting them to see it as a gift, not an assignment, not an obligation, and then have a conversation about whether it's meaningful to them. So that's my recommendation about how to bring it into a group. And I do that very frequently with a CEO or a COO and their direct reports. And immediately move into a conversation about awareness, which is, where are all the places where they see themselves every day blaming or justifying or beating themselves up or feeling trapped? Where are the commonalities across the individuals in those things? And which one of them would they like to prioritize and start to address together? And it creates very high levels of intention to make pretty rapid changes. I would call them culture hacks on how they work together as a team and what they do.
Could you just give an example, say, of an individual, say, for example, myself, before going through and applying the responsibility process, how I would react to a particular situation versus to after I'm aware of my behavior and applying the responsibility process in that same scenario?
Sure. When we're unaware of this behavior, our responses often come from judgment and evaluation, and therefore it's knee-jerk, and we're often coming back from positions of defensiveness or resistance, which sounds like blame, justify, shame, or obligation. And the more we practice this, the more we actually feel our own responses internally as the other person is still speaking. and we can, as you've heard, remain more calm, more peaceful, and come back at them, from more choice and from even more acknowledgement if they're operating from these coping mechanisms.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, David, let me unmute you. So, hi there, David.
Hi, Chris. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm pretty well. How am I? Freedom, powerful in that choice.
Also a certified trainer. Was in one of our train the trainer workshops while I was there. So also a member of the Leadership Gift Program. So thank you for attending here, David.
Thanks, mate.
How has
the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, there you go ahead, Chris.
I can hear.
We only had a question about well, do you guys want to talk? We've got a few in the room, so we've got a few people who want to ask a few questions.
Okay.
Hi, Chris. Lee here. I just had a question around the kind of annual subscription. Can you kind of let us know what the cost is? I saw that with, it's great we get a discount on it. Could you let us know what it is for an annual subscription?
Sure. The monthly is 97 US and the annual is 997 US. So I think you save, what is that, about 15-20% savings on the annual.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would also say one more thing. My experience is that most, so as many of our members say, if a corporation is going to pay for it, that is such a tiny tuition, and they may not want to mess with monthly receipts. So most people who are being sponsored by their employment do the annual. And that seems to be a big difference that I see in terms of who does monthly and who does annual. And also it depends on, on what you think your commitment is. Another question there, David? Yeah.
Hey, Chris, this is Shalex. I had a question. It's like, once we recognize this status, once we become aware of it, the challenge is to like move out of it and get to the responsibility state. How do we do that? How do I practice? What are the pointers to it? I'm still kind of looking at like, what should I do to get myself unstuck from this status? If you can throw some light on it.
Sure. So the first, the three keys. So if you think about this pattern as being part of the operating system that you don't have any control over, right? So the pattern's in you, it's in me, it's in everybody. We can't change it. The interface that you have to that pattern is your mental abilities of intention, awareness, and confront. And again, confront doesn't mean being confrontational towards people. It means your own courage to face your own fears and your own anxiety. Various leadership and personal growth programs key on one of these, right? So some programs key on intention, living intentionally, living on purpose. Some key on awareness. Awareness is the first step towards change, consciousness raising, mindfulness, etc. Some focus on confront by talking about courage and facing your fears. We focus on all three together as being the keys to responsibility. So, and I'm sorry, I missed your name. Would you say it again?
Shalex.
Shanix. So
Shalex. L.
Shanif.
Okay. David is just gonna type it. It's okay.
All right. Sorry about that. So if today, if you would make an intention to get to the mental state of responsibility around around a few of your small upsets this afternoon or evening or tomorrow. Make an intention to
Right.
catch yourself blaming and stop. Make an intention to catch yourself justifying and stop. And then just notice what happens when you do that. So if you catch yourself justifying and stop, you're going to feel bad is your next thought. You're going to go into shame. And if you can catch yourself there and stop, your next thought is obligation. And if you say, but I really do have to, right, go to this stupid meeting, then I would invite you to look at your ankles and see if there are shackles around your ankles, and if there is, you know, a military escort making you go to that meeting, or are you really taking yourself there? And then I want you to confront that truth, which is, you know what? The truth is I'm going to this meeting out of choice because I don't really know a better choice right now. And
Yeah.
and if you will, so that's putting intention, awareness, and confront all together. And only if you do that will your mind start working on finding a way to make the meeting more valuable, finding a way to change the meeting, finding a way to get out of the meeting, etc. But if you simply say, I have to go to this stupid thing, your mind never gets to the mental state of responsibility. It never helps you try to change. So apply intention, awareness, and confront. And you know, one of the best things that you could do is take a index card or a post-it note and write one of the words from the chart on it. So write down the word lay blame, and then just make two columns. And in one column, write got off of it, and on the other column, it got out. And as you go through the day, if you have the thought of blame but you don't act on it, you get off of it before it gets out. You give yourself a mark on that side. And if you don't realize that you had the thought of blame until you already did it, you give yourself a mark on the other side. And at the end of the day, give yourself 10 points for every time you got off of it before it got out, and 1 point for it getting out. And people have told me that this game has changed their behavior in a week. A lot of people have told me that. So does that help you a little bit with how to get started practicing?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. That was really good.
You're welcome. Yeah. Anybody else, David?
No, that's about it here. Back to you if you like.
Pardon me?
Back to you if you like, or you want me to talk about my story a bit? I think we're going to get out of the room in a minute.
I'd love for you to tell your story. I was pretty impressed with the depth of you and your colleagues, your approach to coaching. And so I'm pretty honored that you have gone ahead with the certification and joined the program. I'd love to hear a little about your story.
Sure. Talking about that, Alida, who was on the same course I caught up with briefly, and we both talked about how this has actually made our lives really hard.
Oh yeah?
Because now we have this awareness of when we're laying blame or justifying or feeling guilty or in obligation. So it's actually made it a really, to be honest, quite a struggle because it's hard to break those habits that we have. Anecdotally, like I use it at home. Like you told us not to use it at home. I totally straight away did that. But mostly with my kids, I think. And then seeing it, they've actually commented that they like the change that they've seen in me, which is for me is quite powerful. So if they can see that change in me, that means it's sort of starting to work. That it's starting to work on me. Whether it's starting to work for them, I'm probably yet to see.
Right. So the struggle that you talk about, though, it's by choice because you see a payoff.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do actually see it. I don't know if the guys at Westpac probably don't know me before I did the responsibility process. So they've only seen me operating under the responsibility process. And maybe I'll throw it up into TJ. I don't know if you see me stopping myself sometimes or thinking about where I am.
I'll,
quick program. Pretty positive.
yeah, so I'll reinforce that. The application of this is not easy. In fact, one of the best compliments I've ever received was from somebody in a leadership development program who said, you know, most leadership development programs tell you leadership is easy, just do A, B, and C, and you'll be fine. And he said, you don't teach that. You know, you teach that that the responsibility process is straightforward and will be a great GPS or compass for you. But it's not easy, especially on the deeper ruts or deeper patterns that we've created in our lives that we decide that we want to change. And so it's true for me as well. For me, you know, um, uh, changing a meeting that I don't want to be obliged to go to might be easy. Figuring out how to recover from a huge error in running my business, you know, might be a little less. You know, oh, that's just an everyday little challenge to overcome. You know, might be you know, so sometimes it stings to take responsibility, doesn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the confront part, is we need to be willing to face ourselves and face our fear and face our anxiety so that we can actually see the truth and grow into it.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Oh. Thanks, Chris.
Yep. Anyone else? So I can only see hands from attendees, but Mark or Phil, if you have more, love to hear from you. And attendees, questions? Katie, Mary, Martin, Nicole, Timothy, Leslie, Damon, Joseph. Oh, hello, Joseph.
I guess it's Phil. I'm only probably up to module 4, so I've still got quite a long way to go. I'm not past intent yet.
I might have missed some of what you said there. You can turn your camera on too if you want.
I've moved desks, so yeah, not a good idea. So what I was saying is I'm only up to really module 4, so I've probably still got, I know I've still got probably a long way to go in terms of thinking and application.
Oh yeah, plenty more to go.
Other than the decision which I think is the important one. I mean, when we start these, the very first question is are you committed? Are you in or are you not? So I think I've transcended that point, and I know that I'm committed to complete the course, which is probably something in of itself.
Yeah, so I think part of the commitment decision there is that you know, the responsibility process is going to be in you and all around you for the rest of your life. And the truth is, do you want it to just be operating at default status, or do you want to take charge of it? And for me, that was a pretty easy decision when I realized that. I'd much rather grow than cope.
When you put it like that.
Yeah. So again, my encouragement is to practice and apply, and simply completing the 8 core modules is, I call that the getting ready work.
Yeah, that's just breathing, right?
Yeah.
You're just learning to breathe. What I have noticed though is I've actually started referring back to the notes, which is probably haven't done for a long time when I've done a course. It's actually go back to the notes.
Yeah, thank you for that. I find that that's true, and I think that's because this material is the very essence. It's the very core understanding of this model and the other models and principles behind it, and no fluff. And so it's a pretty powerful material. So thank you for. I take that as a compliment. So.
Yes, it's a compliment.
All right. Well, thank you, Philip. Check back attendees. No hands up. All right. Isaac, did you have a hand? I mean, Neil, excuse me, Neil. Isaac. Nope. David, I'm guessing your hand is still up from before. All right. Oh, Neil, okay. I'm unmuting you. There you go. You're up, Neil.
Yeah. Hi, Christopher. Yeah, just wanted to explore a bit further, just a deeper dive as to this innate ability or power that we have as humans to enable change, to get out of the default state into the responsibility state. Is that power self-will, or is it just the innate ability to reason, learn, and adapt? Does your research point as to what that is? Like, is there more? Could you shed more light on that, please?
Well, so innate will would be intention. So that's certainly part of it. One of the things that we've seen is that when people have super high intention, if you think of, the people who are at the top of any field or any sports, they have such powerful will towards their, call it their vision, their calling, their goal, whatever it is, that what we see is that they will not allow the coping mechanisms to stop them. So intention is powerful by itself, but it's also awareness of the fact that we have this coping mind, these mental states where we can get totally trapped no matter how smart and ambitious we are, and not even realize it. Which is so much of my compassion towards the people that I am coaching or mentoring. Is we even use, we think that smart, well-educated people would get over blaming and justifying and beating themselves up. My experience is they just make up better stories. So awareness is huge. And then, as I said, confront the ability to face yourself and to look in the mirror and examine your own beliefs, your own assumptions, your own interpretations, and look for falsehoods in those assumptions or beliefs, or look for truths that you're not seeing, which we interpret as being new ahas or new insights that we can act on. So for me, the fact that we have this responsibility process in us and the fact that we can interact with it is all the data I need to believe that self-leadership is innate in all of us. And my belief is that successful leadership is repeated examples of overcoming greater and greater challenges and learning how to call on others to overcome challenges if the challenges are bigger than you. So one of the researchers who defined leadership for me is a professor emeritus at the University of Michigan who wrote a book called The Leadership Engine. And he defined leadership as stepping up and taking responsibility for some problem, situation, or opportunity. And then mobilizing action, attracting others, and mobilizing action if that problem or opportunity is bigger than one person. And there's plenty of writers out there who define leadership ultimately as responsibility. So I don't know if did that address your question, Neil?
Great, that was really good. Thank you for that deep insight. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. My pleasure. All right, going once, going twice. I'll check the questions. Oh, Shalex, thank you. Is there innate power or ability to reason? Thanks for the session. Thanks, Damon. All right. I'll check the dashboard one more time, see if anybody's got a hand up. I don't see any hands up. Thank you all for hanging in here. I appreciate you, and I look forward to hearing from you if there's any way I can be of help to you. Take care. Bye.